Good evening, dear listeners of the Forest Spirits channel. Today we'll hear a story about a man discovers mysterious footprints, strange symbols, and an unnerving presence lurking in the woods near his cabin. As the late afternoon sun slipped behind the dense trees, long shadows stretched over the snow-covered riverbank. A cold breeze rustled the branches, causing frost-covered limbs to sway softly. Patrick remained still, gazing at the ground beyond his small wooden cabin. Fresh footprints crisscrossed the snow in a winding pattern around his home, their edges crisp despite fading light. He crouched to examine them, noticing their strange, irregular shapes, unfamiliar and unsettling. Some looked like paw prints, but with tight spirals and sharp turns, as if someone had been watching his cabin. The tracks crossed repeatedly into the woods and back, hinting at an intelligent observer. Silence pressed down on him, interrupted only by faint snow rustling and distant ice groans on the river. He brushed away a thin layer of snow from the tracks with gloved fingers, feeling that they were recent, less than an hour old. Narrowing his eyes, Patrick studied the pattern carefully, a sense of unease tightening in his chest. Years of patrolling these woods taught him to read animal tracks, but this pattern felt deliberate and purposeful, sparking curiosity. A sudden gust made the trees sway and snow whisper, and Patrick shivered, instinct warning him of unseen watchers. Trusting his senses, he sensed something just beyond the trees, feeling it in his bones. His hand moved to his coat pocket for his flashlight. Flicking it on, he illuminated the snow's strange contours. Kneeling, he traced a spiral footprint, hearing the crunch beneath him. A sudden sharp crack broke the silence, perhaps a shifting ice sheet or a snapping branch echoing from the woods. Patrick tightened his grip on the flashlight, eyes scanning the darkness for movement. Nothing appeared, only snow softly falling and blanketing everything in cold silence. He slowly straightened, suspicion weighing heavily on him. The forest around him seemed thicker and darker, shadows pooling like ink. Familiar with these woods, its animal trails and rustling leaves, he noticed that these footprints were unlike any he'd encountered before. They suggested intelligence or perhaps an otherworldly presence. His mind raced. Why here? Why now? The tracks might be a warning or a trap. He remembered stories of strange lights and unexplainable sounds in these woods. The faint metallic smell in the air made his stomach tighten, teasing his instincts. He grasped his worn notebook and binoculars, then carefully noted footprints with spiral patterns. Glancing into the shadows, he considered next steps. Someone or something had been watching him. He hesitated, weighing risks of pursuing or setting a trap. Choosing caution, he placed a flare near the cabin and took position to observe the clearing as darkness fell. The forest seemed to breathe, every branch crack and wind whisper echoed in the quiet. Suddenly, a faint metallic clang sounded from deeper inside, followed by a low musical hum. Patrick's senses heightened. The noise was unnatural, too steady and purposeful. He looked around the trees, but nothing moved. Only the snow gently fell, muffling any further sounds. Minutes felt like hours. Then a shadow flickered between the trees, quick and silent. He tightened his grip on the flare. The intruder was close. He prepared himself for whatever might appear next. A gust of wind carried an almost melodic whisper like distant voices or a haunting tune. Patrick listened but couldn't find its source. The woods stayed still. Only the snow's soft descent persisted, cloaking everything in icy silence. Occasionally, a branch snapped or shifted, reminding him that nature was unpredictable and alive. He returned his gaze to the footprints, which now appeared to lead toward the cabin, either an invitation or a trap. His mind raced, questioning who or what left them, and why they circled his home curiosity or something darker. A sudden movement in his peripheral vision froze him. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall, cloaked in darkness, with eyes shining unnaturally. Patrick's heart hammered, but he stayed calm, reaching slowly for his sidearm, not drawing, but prepared. The figure halted and advanced, holding a strange device with a faint glow. It aimed it at the ground, then lowered it. Its rasping voice sounded almost mechanical. You've seen the signs. You're not meant to understand yet. Patrick's hold on his weapon tightened. His thoughts scrambled for an answer, but silence prevailed. He kept his gaze on the intruder, noting subtle signs of curiosity and caution in their posture. Suddenly, the figure turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving only a faint hum from the device behind. Patrick stood still, heart pounding as he watched the shadow vanish, and examined the footprints, less random and more like a message. It dawned on him this was no ordinary animal or trespasser. An intelligent force was watching him and influencing events, as indicated by the pattern, scent, and strange device. He lowered his weapon with new determination. These clues formed part of a larger mystery that remained hidden in darkness. With dawn approaching, Patrick, prepared to leave his cabin, led to a revelation that would redefine his understanding of these woods. As morning light started to seep through cracks in the cabin's weathered panels, shadows shifted on the frost-covered ground outside. A dense whirling mist hovered low over the snow, twisting around sparse trees and muffling distant forest sounds. The air was frigid, each breath forming a fleeting cloud that vanished into the icy silence. Inside, silence weighed heavily, broken only by the faint creak of old logs settling beneath morning's weight. Patrick sat quietly by the window, staring at the foggy scenery beyond. His hands rested on his knees, fingers rough and trembling, not because of age, but from lingering unease that refused to fade. Haunted by night shadows, strange noises, a metallic smell in the air, an unnatural quiet after the storm, he studied faint footprints circling the cabin's perimeter. No new tracks appeared. Yet he felt eyes watching him, pricking his skin with tension. Suddenly, outside movement caught his eye. Through the frost-covered glass, he saw a figure standing still just beyond. Narrowing his eyes, he identified a young boy, perhaps 12, clutching something tightly with trembling hands amid swirling fog. The boy's face was pale. Eyes darted nervously as if expecting danger at any moment. Patrick hesitated before opening the door. Cold air hit him sharply and bitingly, making him pull his coat tighter around himself. The boy stayed still, eyes on the ground, trembling slightly, without flinching or stepping back. Yuki Patrick said softly, voice rough but steady, "Why are you out here so early?" The boy's lips quivered as he spoke, strange sounds. "Last night. Shadows. In the woods." Patrick examined him closely, noting trembling hands and nervous eye flickers. It was unusual for a child to go so far alone, especially with the fog thickening around them. His words showed genuine fear, making Patrick consider something unseen might be happening. Shadows, Patrick echoed, moving closer. What kind of shadows? Yuki hesitated, nervously glancing at the trees, then at his trembling hands. Dark shapes, moving fast, no sound. I hear them, but I can't see clearly. And whispers, not words. I was scared they might approach. The atmosphere grew tense with unspoken doubts. Patrick looked toward the forest, where tall trees stood like silent guards. The boy's account defied logic, yet the forest had always held secrets, old and new. Still, the thought of unseen figures moving through the woods at night haunted him, awakening past fears. He knelt to Yuki's level and gently rested a hand on his trembling shoulder. Did they do anything? Come close to you. Yuki quickly shook his head, eyes flickering with relief mixed with lingering fear. No, but I saw shadows and heard sounds. I couldn't sleep. I waited here hoping someone would arrive. Patrick gazed into the fog ahead, instincts telling him to be cautious, but couldn't dismiss Yuki's story. The forest felt unnaturally still and silent now. Did you notice anything else that might help us understand? Yuki whispered. Sometimes I see eyes watching us, bigger, brighter than animals, and I hear a faint humming. Like a song coming from somewhere unknown. A shiver ran down Patrick's spine as he realized these strange phenomena, glowing eyes, shifting shadows, eerie sounds were more than natural wildlife. The forest was changing beyond understanding. Have you shared this with anyone else? Patrick asked, voice calm but worried. Yuki nodded quickly. Only my grandmother. She said it's just wind and shadows, but I know better. I had to tell someone who would believe me. Patrick tightened his posture, considering Yuki's words. The boy's sincerity was clear. He saw the nervous flicker of his eyes toward the woods, expecting shadows to return at any moment. Things were becoming more complicated. All right, Patrick replied after a moment. Stay near the cabin and watch for anything strange. If you see or hear something odd again, come directly to me. Do you understand? Yuki nodded firmly, eyes wide with relief and lingering fear. Yes, sir. The old man took out a small flashlight from his coat pocket, turned it on, and its beam cut through the fog to light the uneven snow below. We'll check the perimeter now. I want to see if anything's out there, something that shouldn't be. Yuki hesitated, but then followed cautiously, trusting him. They moved toward the clearing's edge, their flashlight piercing the morning mist. Silence weighed heavily on them, broken only by their steps and faint rustlings of trees. Patrick looked around for movement. Footprints from last night still circled the cabin, but no new signs appeared. Still, he felt watched. Shadows seemed alive around him as the fog thickened around the trees like ghostly tendrils. Every shadow seemed charged with danger, sounds magnified, branches snapping, whispers lingering in the air. Suddenly, movement flashed, a vague shape slipped behind a tree and vanished. His stomach nodded. The woods held mysteries, and whatever was inside was neither simple nor harmless. Yuki looked at him trembling. Do you think it's risky? Patrick paused, then nodded slowly. It's uncertain, but we must stay vigilant. They moved carefully through the woods, tension growing with each step. The forest felt alive with unseen forces. Patrick wondered if Yuki's stories pointed to spirits, shadows, or something else entirely. The forest had awakened, hiding no longer. As they neared the cabin, fog lifted slightly, revealing the silent watchfulness of the woods. Patrick sensed a new weight pressing on him, realizing the night's mysteries had deepened and signals were emerging. A strange, nearly human-like echo resonated, distorted by the night darkness. Patrick lit his lantern, its small flame flickering steady. Its light showed a basic cabin interior, a rough table, mismatched chairs, and a worn rifle against the wall. He checked the rifle's chamber to ensure it was loaded, while Yuki watched frightened and silent with wide eyes. Patrick looked outside again, listening closely to the persistent howling interwoven with faint rustlings and crackling like dry branches breaking under weight. No signs of recent movement, no footprints or disturbed snow revealed any passage. The forest was eerily quiet except for distant hunting sounds. He pressed his eye to the window glass, moonlight illuminating snow in silvery tones. Shadows stretched across the clearing, but no movement disturbed it. A feeling of being watched persisted amid his instincts, honed by years in the woods, that something was wrong. The sounds didn't resemble any known animal, yet their origin remained hidden just beyond perception. Yuki moved closer, voice shaky. "Are you sure it's only wolves?" he whispered anxiously, glancing nervously around the dark cabin corners. Patrick shook his head slowly. Wolves wouldn't howl like that so late with that tone. There's something else out there. His tone was calm but firm, trying to comfort Yuki while convincing himself. He reached into his coat pocket and felt the cool, smooth talisman, a gift from an elder long ago, believed to bring luck. Though superstition wasn't his usual reliance, tonight it gave him a faint sense of certainty. He stepped back from the window and approached the door. Outside, the untouched snow lay silently as if no creature had crossed it recently. Still, his chest felt tighter with tension. Gently, he cracked the door open a little and listened carefully. The wind howled around the cabin, testing his resolve, but no other sounds appeared, no footsteps, rustling leaves, only distant howling echoes. He quickly looked at Yuki. "Stay close," he whispered softly. The boy nodded, clutching his knees and watching the flickering fire. Patrick stepped outside as cold immediately bit into him. He moved carefully, each step slow and deliberate. Snow crunched quietly under his boots, hopefully not too loud. He circled the cabin cautiously, senses sharp for any movement. Darkness surrounded him, with trees leaning in and creaking like whispers of unseen voices. His eyes scanned the tree-lined shadows, swayed in the wind, but no signs of footprints or disturbance in the snow. He paused to listen again. Only wind's mournful sound remained. A sudden gust made shadows inside flicker fiercely. Patrick looked toward the forest, feeling a prickling at his spine. The strange howling started again, closer and more urgent than before. He gripped his rifle tighter and retreated toward the door slowly. Inside, Yuki looked up nervously. "Are they coming?" he asked quietly. Patrick hesitated and shook his head. "Not yet, but we must stay alert." He moved to the window, eyes sweeping the woods. Moonlight showed a slight ripple on the snow, almost invisible disturbance. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow thin and long, moving beyond trees. He pressed his hand against the glass to see better, but it disappeared quickly. Suddenly, the howling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence weighing on his chest. Tense muscles responded to the heavy quiet. He sat down with a grip on his rifle's stock, mind racing to identify what caused these sounds, animals or something darker inside the darkness. Yuki gripped his hand tightly and whispered, "What if they come in?" Patrick met his eyes, seeing their shared fear. "We'll stand our ground. We've faced worse," he said calmly but secretly doubted. The woods hid secrets, feeling closer tonight. A sudden gust slammed the door, startling them, the fire through dancing shadows. Patrick quickly stoked it, sparks flying into the darkness. Every sound and shadow now felt threatening. He looked at the snow outside and saw a smooth, circular pattern with no footprints. Was it a sign? Is this an invitation or a warning? The questions haunted his mind, each more disturbing than before. He pressed his hand into the cold snow, trying to understand. As night fell deeper, distant howls grew louder and more urgent. Shadows outside gathered and shifted into unexplainable forms. Patrick sat tense, eyes on the forest, muscles clenched. The line between natural and supernatural blurred, as if unseen eyes watched from beyond night's veil. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared past the trees, something moving, casting an eerie shimmer on the snow. He squinted, but it vanished behind some branches. His senses warned him that something had shifted. Danger was moving closer. The carved symbols in the snow, whispering shadows, unnatural silence, they all signaled an awakening beyond understanding. Tonight marked a turning point. The boundary between known and unknown was dissolving. Yuki held his hand tighter. Is it finally over? He whispered softly. Patrick looked at him, a flicker of determination lighting his eyes. No, but now we realize we're not alone. Whatever's out there senses us, and tomorrow we'll have to face it. His hold on the rifle tightened as he clenched his jaw, preparing for what's to come. As dawn approached, distant howls faded into uneasy silence. Shadows receded, but the feeling of an unseen presence lingered like a dark cloud over the landscape. Patrick understood that last night's revelations had changed everything: his perceptions, fears, and survival stakes. The forest was revealing its secrets, and he was no longer just an outsider, but part of its unfolding mystery. The first light barely pierced the dense canopy, casting a faint cold glow over the snow-covered clearing. Silence stretched thick and heavy, broken only by faint groans of frozen branches and a lone bird's distant call echoing in stillness. Patrick stood motionless, eyes fixed on fresh footprints crossing the pristine snow away from the cabin's doorstep. His breath fogged in the cold air as he knelt down and cleared some snow to examine the tracks more closely. The tracks were bigger than wolf prints, wider at the toes, with a deliberate pattern. Patrick traced them, sensing sharp ridges, claw marks, or something sharper. A cold metallic scent filled the air, making his stomach tighten. He looked around again, trying to connect the signs. The footprints circling the cabin suggested a purposeful creature familiar with this terrain. Yuki stood quietly at the edge of the woods, eyes fixed on the shadows flickering outside. "Did you see them?" Patrick asked softly. The boy nodded silently, unnerved by what he had witnessed. "Not like animals, more like someone observing us." Patrick's jaw tightened, tension rippling through him. He stepped slowly forward, scrutinizing shadows more carefully. They flickered briefly, darker patches on the snow before disappearing behind a thick tree trunk. It was unclear if they were illusions from the morning haze or something more deliberate. He examined the footprints, then glanced at Yuki. Could be animals, but these tracks, they're too precise, more human. Yuki looked at the ground, then back into the woods. Maybe someone from the village came here, curious about the forest. Patrick shook his head slowly. No, no one should be out here, especially with how quiet everything's been lately. His voice was cautious and suspicious. Recent strange events, the shadows and smell made him wary of outsiders or unseen beings. A gust of wind moved the branches, making Yuki shiver as he held his coat tighter. "What do you think it is?" Yuki asked quietly. Patrick paused, narrowing his eyes to examine the footprints again. His instincts, honed through years of solitude, told him this was no normal animal. An intelligent presence had been here, watching or testing. The track pattern and shadows suggested intent. He glanced at the cabin and then into the woods, considering his options. Signs indicated something purposeful was observing they were being watched. The metallic scent intensified, becoming more pronounced and invasive. Someone or something left those tracks nearby. Their purpose was clear. He tightened his fist briefly before speaking softly. "Stay alert. This isn't just wildlife, someone. Something is here intentionally." Yuki looked nervous but intrigued. Could it be dangerous? Patrick nodded slowly, contemplating the possibilities. It might be, or something else entirely. "We can't ignore it now." He checked his rifle carefully. The morning's clues suggested this was no normal threat, an intelligent observer testing us or waiting for the right moment. As he stepped outside to scan further, a quick shadow moved between two trees silently. His heart raced, but he took a deep breath, steadying himself. The forest buzzed with whispers and hidden watchers. The tracks, shadows, and metallic smell created a web of doubt. He felt a deliberate, watchful presence growing stronger each moment, no longer just a suspicion, but certainty. Turning to Yuki, he said, "Stay close. Don't go far. I'll recheck the perimeter so we can find their source." The boy nodded, clutching his coat with nervous eyes. Patrick moved carefully, senses alert to every sound, rustling leaves, snapping branches, faint movements that hinted at unseen danger. He circled the cabin slowly, examining the snow-covered ground carefully until he reached the back, kneeling again to study footprints leading deeper into the woods. They appeared to lead into an unseen part of the forest, as if guiding him somewhere specific. A gust of wind brought the metallic smell again, sharper and more vivid. The tracks were fresh, clearly indicating someone or something was nearby, watching and waiting. The deliberate pattern of footprints suggested purpose, not randomness. He straightened up, ears alert for any sound. The woods stayed unnervingly quiet, aside from a distant bird cry and the faint crunch of snow beneath his feet. Still, an almost imperceptible shift hinted at anticipation beneath the silence. His eyes flicked to Yuki, whose expression showed awe and concern simultaneously. "We need to find out who's been here," Patrick muttered hoarsely, "and why." Suddenly, a shadow flickered briefly at the corner of his vision, disappearing instantly. Realizing the footprints had shifted everything, this was no longer just animal tracks or natural signs, but evidence of an intelligent presence monitoring them, maybe testing their defenses. The cold morning light marked a new, uncertain, and dangerous chapter ahead. Patrick's confidence faded as he realized the forest's secrets were unraveling, and someone was watching them intently. The game had shifted, they weren't alone anymore. Thick slate-gray clouds loomed overhead, dulling the last sunlight and casting a pale hue over the snow-covered woods. The biting wind had quieted, leaving only the gentle rustling of dead leaves and distant ice cracking on frozen branches. Patrick stood at the forest's edge, eyes locked on the approaching figure, muscles tense with anticipation. The man staggered from the shadows, shoulders hunched against cold, cloaked in torn dirt-stained clothes, exposing raw flesh. His trembling hands clung to his side while wide glassy eyes darted nervously among shadows, fearful of unseen dangers behind every tree. Patrick tightened his grip on his rifle but stayed alert. The stranger looked unsettling disheveled hair, grime streaks across his cheeks, and a faint blood stain near his temple yet appeared more lost than threatening. "Who are you?" Patrick asked calmly yet cautiously, voice steady despite tension. The man blinked rapidly and breathed hard, pausing in silence. "I followed strange sounds," he whispered, trembling. "I thought I might find the source nearby. Yes, I initially believed it was just animals, but then I noticed shadows moving quickly just out of view and the noises. They didn't seem normal, like something was observing me." Patrick examined him closely, noticing recent scratches on his arm and a shallow cut on his shoulder. The wounds looked fresh, dried blood suggested a struggle. A suspicion arose. What else had he experienced? "Did you encounter anyone else or see anything strange besides the shadows?" Patrick asked quietly. The man hesitated, eyes darting again. "No, but I had the feeling I was being followed. Then I heard voices whispering, not human at all. I ran, but they continued approaching me. Suddenly, I tripped and fell into the bushes. Now I stand here." Patrick's eyes narrowed, sensing that his suspicions were correct. Something strange was in these woods. The whispers, shadows, and feeling of being watched all hinted at an unseen entity. Still, doubt remained. Could this man be honest or hiding something darker? A faint snap from a branch startled both of us. We froze and looked toward the trees. Patrick's instincts kicked in. Something was nearby, watching us. "Stay behind me," he whispered, lowering his rifle slightly but ready to fire. "Speak quietly and tell me everything if you saw anything else." The man hesitated but obeyed, moving closer while gripping his torn sleeve tightly. His shaky hands revealed his fear as his eyes darted nervously between shadows and Patrick. Suddenly, a gust of wind carried a guttural whisper from all directions. Patrick's hair bristled. He recognized these signs, warnings of something beyond normal wildlife. "Listen," he said, tense. "You're lucky I found you, but I don't trust easily. If those sounds are real, whatever's out there isn't just an animal, it's something watching us now." The stranger's eyes widened with dread and relief. "What should I do? I don't want to stay if it's dangerous." Patrick drew a breath, steadying his voice. "Stay alert. Keep your voice down. If you saw anything unusual, tell me everything, no matter how improbable it seems." The man nodded, visibly trembling. "I swear." Shadows moved faster than I've ever seen, and I heard whispers, voices in an unfamiliar language, not human, like they were summoning or warning. A cold chill ran through Patrick's body. The forest was no longer just home to animals, but a place of secrets. Something unseen lurked beneath, defying logic and reason. He quickly glanced at the distant trees before returning to the trembling man. The feeling of dread deepened, yet his resolve remained firm. This account proved that the woods were no longer simple wilds. Dark forces might be lurking there. A faint hum drifted from the depths as the wind shifted, Sharpening Patrick's senses, he felt unseen eyes watching him closely. "Where exactly did you come from?" Patrick asked calmly but authoritatively. The man vaguely directed east, explaining he was hiking when he heard sounds and followed them, sensing something alive in the woods. Nothing clear, just unusual footprints, as if something had been circling nearby, but I couldn't see well. I don't trust easily. If those sounds are real, whatever's out there isn't just an animal, something else watching us from nearby. The stranger looked around nervously, eyes full of fear and hope. "What should I do? I don't want to stay if it's worse than I thought." Patrick calmed himself, voice steady. "Stay alert, stay silent. If you see anything strange again, tell me immediately, no matter how unbelievable." The man nodded, trembling but understanding. "I saw shadows moving faster than anything I've seen before, heard whispers not human. I think the woods are alive and calling out." Patrick's jaw tightened as the forest blurred into an unsettling place where unseen forces roamed beneath the surface, no longer just animals or nature. He glanced at the dark trees, then back to the man, feeling undeniable danger, but knowing action was essential. The woods now revealed secrets darker than shadows, and as a haunting hum filled the air, Patrick realized their watch had only begun. Trust and suspicion heightened, darkness concealed threats that refused to stay hidden. Dawn's light was gone, replaced by oppressive shadows pressing on the cabin walls, while in sight Elena trembled with shallow breaths and haunting visions of footsteps approaching in endless woods. A distant growl echoed ominously through the timber, uncertain whether animal or unknown creature beyond darkness. Elena was awakened by a sound, her eyes snapping open as her pupils dilated. Her limbs felt heavy and weak. Instinctively, she pressed her hands against her chest, clutching her ribs amid the shadows cast by the faint gray light through the frosted window. A draft slipped under the door, making her blanket ripple and cold seep in, forcing her to stay still and listen. Every creak and whisper heightened our vulnerability, while images of predators haunted our mind-glowing eyes, claws scraping bark, relentless pursuit. Suddenly, a faint shuffle outside made her freeze. She clenched her breath as she watched the shadow door hinge squeak gently, sensing someone or something nearby. Is it just the house settling? Her jaw clenched, fighting the urge to scream or call out. She had to stay silent to conserve her remaining strength. The others in the cabin had fallen into tense silence as well. Patrick sat by the stove, grim-faced, eyes fixed on the door. His hands rested on his knees with fingertips tapping rhythmically. Despite his age, decades of experience kept his senses sharp and alert. Tonight, even he looked strained, muscles tense with anticipation. Yuki curled into a corner, clutching a small blanket tightly. His white eyes darted anxiously between Elena and the door, trembling but hiding his fear. The boy's young face revealed his anxiety, yet he refused to cry out. Occasionally, he looked toward Elena for reassurance. They were safe, though shadows outside told a different story. Elena's lips parted to speak, but her throat was dry. Her voice was lost in the oppressive silence. Instead, her trembling fingers reached for a small medicine vial, her only hope to stabilize her worsening condition, her hand shaking uncontrollably as she clung weakly to it, fear flooding her mind that her strength was leaving her too quickly. A sudden burst of icy wind rattled the cabin door ominously. terrifying Elena as she pressed her forehead to her knees. Outside, growls and faint scratching sounds grew louder, testing their fragile shelter. Patrick slowly reached for his rifle, checking the chamber with deliberate movements, his face grim with concern. "Stay quiet," he whispered firmly, knowing silence was their best chance against whatever lurked outside. Yuki nodded anxiously, clutching his blanket tightly. Elena, despite exhaustion, nodded faintly, eyes fixed on the door with newfound resolve. She knew any move might trigger the creature outside, but her instincts kept her alert. The growling briefly stopped, replaced by a strange rhythmic scratching like claws on wood. The sound was unsettling, almost hypnotic in its unnatural rhythm. Silence afterward was deafening, as if the forest held its breath. Elena's breathing became ragged, her body trembling uncontrollably. Shadows at the windows stretched and shifted, as if watching from the darkness. Her vision blurred at the edges as she fought to stay conscious. Her mind raced to identify what was outside: an animal, a mythic beast, or something darker. Patrick stepped closer, alert for movement, his voice softly saying, "We must stay still. Whatever it is, it's testing us. We remain quiet and wait." Yuki looked at him wide-eyed and frightened. What if it breaks in? Patrick's jaw clenched. "We'll handle it, but panicking only makes things worse. Stay calm." Elena's fists curled, her skin hot against the cold air, her mind filled with fear, yet suddenly clear. Nothing about the shadows, nightmares, was accidental. Whatever's outside isn't an ordinary beast, something else is involved, impossible to explain. A faint metallic smell entered the room, unnatural and human-made, mixed with forest odors. Her heart raced as she realized an unnatural scent. She opened her mouth to warn them but hesitated, unsure they'd believe her. A loud crack outside shattered silence, the sound of wood splintering, and the cabin shook as if hit by unseen force. The growling grew louder and more menacing. Shadows danced at the window as if pushed by something unseen, threatening to break through. Patrick lowered his rifle slightly, eyes fixed on the door, voice tense but steady. "We stay inside. Don't open that door no matter what. We listen and wait." The room fell silent except for Elena's shallow breaths. Outside, the lurking threat was undeniable now. Inside, they clung together, anxious but determined, realizing danger was imminent. Elena's vision dimmed again, her strength fading as she fought to stay conscious, clutching hope. Her thoughts turned to her wounds, and the night's shift and encounter with something beyond understanding. The shadows were just the start of a darker mystery that would forever change her perception. Suddenly, Elena woke with ragged breathing as flickering candlelight cast erratic shadows on the wooden walls. Night's cold air seeped into her bones as a bead of sweat traced her forehead. She looked at the window, where flickering shadowy figures hovered just beyond glass, moving unnaturally. Her heartbeat pounded loudly as she tried to understand what she saw. Yuki sat tense nearby, staring at the woods outside with wide eyes and trembling hands clutching his knees, searching for answers. Silence filled the cabin except for wind noise and distant groans from the timber. Elena finally spoke softly. "Did you see them, Yuki? Watching us?" He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the window. "Yes. I saw lights flickering through trees like sparks in darkness. They suddenly appeared and vanished just as quickly. I thought I was dreaming, but I saw movement, flickering like fireflies in a storm." her brow furrowed, trying to interpret the images. Outside, shadows shifted and pulsed, almost alive, waiting. She remembered strange sounds, earlier metallic clicks, whispers on the wind, and now fleeting glimpses of lurking figures. Everything told her they weren't alone. The woods hid secrets darker and closer than she'd feared. She reached out, gripping Yuki's trembling hand, feeling cold seep through her fingers. "We can't stay much longer," she whispered. "If they're watching us, hiding inside only worsens things. But where can we go?" Yuki looked at the door, then back at Elena with anxious eyes. The terrain's too dangerous, deep snow and dense woods. Moving now risks getting lost or worse. Elena clenched her jaw, fighting fear and exhaustion, as she realized staying put was too dangerous. "All right," she whispered, barely audible. "Be careful, no noise, no sudden moves. Stay silent and quick." They moved carefully. Elena grabbed her coat, while Yuki held a makeshift torch made from scrap wood and an oil-soaked rag. The candle was out, replaced by the faint glow of the torch's flame, flickering orange on their faces. Elena paused before the door handle. Glancing outside, her breath fogged the glass, and her eyes widened at what she saw. The figures had moved closer, more defined tall shadows with vague features illuminated by flickering light-like watching eyes in darkness. Yuki gently touched her shoulder, whispering, "Be careful, I saw movement near the trees. Something's out there waiting." Taking a deep breath, Elena pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in, making her shiver through her clothes. The snow beneath was pristine and silent, no footprints or signs of any passage. The sense of being watched grew stronger as shadows shifted at her vision's edge, making her scan nervously. Outside, the figures remained still, almost like statues. Elena sensed their presence pressing on her mind, heavy and almost real. She hurried to identify whether these shapes were illusions or something darker. Could it be natural, a mental trick, or something else entirely? Suddenly, tiny lights flickered in the woods, deliberate and moving through the trees as if leading toward the cabin. The glow appeared purposeful, almost intelligent. Yuki's grip tightened on the torch. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "If they're approaching us, we must choose stay hidden or follow the lights. They might lead to friends or danger." Elena watched the faint torchlight that was their only comfort inside. Her thoughts wavered between fear and curiosity, the urge to run, and the instinct to stay and face it. The shadows around her subtly pulsed, alive with unseen energy, while the distant hum of flickering lights grew louder in her ears. A decision formed. She could no longer ignore what was happening. Silence and inaction would only deepen the mystery and danger. She held Yuki's arm tightly. "We follow the lights," she whispered, quietly, slowly and carefully. "Stay vigilant." Yuki nodded, fixing her eyes on the faint glow as they stepped onto the snow-covered ground. The cold bit into them, but an even colder dread ran down their spines, knowing the woods were no longer silent, that unseen eyes watched, and that something ominous approached beyond understanding. As they moved forward, outside shadows remained still like statues, yet distant lights flickered and danced, inviting them deeper into darkness. Elena's mind raced with questions. What did these watchers want? Were they foes or allies? And most frightening, what would they discover when they finally reached the lights? The dense forest surrounded them, blurring the line between known and unknown into a threatening, uncharted territory. The night's darkness enveloped the cabin with tense silence and heavy air. Shadows moved at the forest's edge, disturbed by an unseen force that seemed to pulse purposefully. Patrick stood still at the window, staring at the swaying trees as if under a silent command, his fingers gripping the rifle tightly but hesitating to fire. Every nerve was alert, sensing something alive beyond mere animals. An icy gust rattled the cabin walls, causing branches outside to scrape and groan. His senses sharpened to faint sounds, the crunch of snow, creaking wood, and distant twigs cracking. These noises felt purposeful, orchestrated by an unseen presence lurking nearby. His mind raced with suspicions of intelligent manipulation in the environment. He took a slow breath to calm his pounding heart. Cold chills ran through him, but adrenaline made his hands shake more. Having guarded this wilderness for years, tonight it seemed more conscious, more intentional. A fleeting shadow darted between trees. He tensed instantly and pressed closer to the glass to understand what he saw. The fleeting figure moved swiftly between the trees, almost invisible in the darkness. He squinted, but it vanished before he could see details, leaving only a ghostly outline. His grip tightened on the rifle, torn between shooting and waiting. Every instinct urged action, yet hesitation kept him frozen. Was it a predator or something unfamiliar and anomaly in these woods? A rhythmic hum emanated from the shadows, strangely musical yet unsettling. The forest seemed to sing a tune that resonated deep inside him but made no sense. Suddenly, a sharp crack broke the silence, making him reflexively aim his rifle into the night. He scanned beyond the window, where shadows danced among trees and silence pressed in again. Moving carefully to the door, he listened intently for any sound. Outside, snow crunched softly as he stepped into darkness. His flashlight revealed icy patches and tangled undergrowth, shadows retreating and reappearing as he shone light nearby. His skin prickled from the cold wind, sharpening his senses. Close to the clearing's edge, fresh footprints crossed the snow toward the dense forest. They were recent, only moments old when he spotted them. He crouched down to examine the tracks, which were larger than human but smaller than a bear's, with uneven impressions indicating hurried movement by something heavy. The snow bore clear signs of urgency and purpose. His thoughts raced. Was it a predator hunting or an animal passing by? Or perhaps a deliberate sign left by something more mysterious? The forest seemed alive, shadows flickering as if in rhythm with unseen forces. A faint hum grew louder, whispering secrets beyond understanding. Suddenly, nearby, leaves and branches rustled softly but persistently, a breath or exhale. His grip tightened on the rifle, yet he did not fire. Instead, he listened carefully for its source. A faint rhythmic shift accompanied the rustling, something heavy, moving intentionally. His muscles tensed as he moved closer, cautious not to reveal himself. A quick movement caught his eye again, something darting between the trees faster than he could follow. It vanished into shadows and tangled branches, sending a chill down his spine. He squinted to track it, but it dissolved once more into darkness. His heartbeat quickened, an instinctive urge to act arose. Suddenly, a louder crack echoed nearby, sharper and closer than before. Patrick flinched, instinctively raised his rifle, aiming into the dark silence that seemed to hold its breath. His thoughts raced. What was creating this chaos? An animal or something else? He lowered his weapon cautiously, suspicion overriding certainty. The shadows rippled and twisted as if alive, defying natural explanation. The forest whispers grew louder, almost like a song, an eerie chorus suggesting intelligence behind the phenomena. Patrick understood that whatever was out there was more than a beast, it was a conscious presence watching and waiting for the right moment. He moved cautiously back toward the cabin, every step deliberate and silent. His heightened senses picked up every sound and shadow, blurring the line between reality and something stranger. Dawn's dim light lingered hours away, but already the night had changed his perspective. The wilderness was no longer just nature. Unseen forces seemed to operate with purpose, quietly controlling events beyond his understanding. Reaching the door, he paused to listen again. The forest's hum persisted as an almost warning. He realized he was no longer just an observer, but a participant part of a larger, mysterious game. Chateaus outside seemed alive, waiting silently. Whatever lurked in darkness was now an intelligent presence capable of influence and manipulation. Entering the cabin, its warmth offered little comfort against the cold realization that his view of this place had shifted forever. The night revealed that the forest teemed with hidden, purposeful forces, and he was being watched not only by a creature, but by something far deeper, lurking patiently in shadows. Morning's weak light seeped through thin clouds, casting a dull gray over the snow-covered clearing around the cabin. The air was sharp and cold, tinged with pine and a metallic smell that prickled senses, hinting at something unnatural. He stood a few steps from the porch, eyes fixed on fresh footprints crossing the snow in chaotic patterns, markers of recent activity leading away from the cabin door. His breath formed fleeting clouds as he crouched, brushing snow aside with rough fingers. The tracks were purposeful, but irregular, small, and uneven, indicating someone paused here, examining the ground intently. No signs of struggle or blood stains were present, but a faded, frayed piece of fabric was partially buried among the snow, caught on a twig. Patrick's eyes sharpened as he pulled it free, noting its worn color and ragged edges, evidence of a frantic escape or fight. Elena sat nearby, trembling despite her heavy coat. Her pale face showed exhaustion, eyes unfocused, hands shaking against her knees. Her wounds, though bandaged, seemed worse. Overnight swelling around her ribs increased and breathing shallow. A faint fever hue colored her cheeks as her skin felt clammy. Patrick clenched his jaw tightly. The overcast sky kept out the sun, casting dull light over everything. He briefly observed Elena's worsening condition before returning to the snow. His mind raced. The torn cloth had been ripped with frantic force claw marks or sharp edges, visible at the frayed edges, and strange symbols had been scuffed into the snow nearby, deep, irregular lines crossing and spiraling outward like carved warnings or symbols created with intent. Moving closer, he knelt to examine them carefully. The disturbed snow around them formed patterns that defied normal footprints, as if some unseen force had pressed into the ground, deliberately carving unfamiliar symbols. The metallic aroma grew stronger and sharper, causing his nostrils to flare as he inhaled deeply. A quick movement at the edge of his vision made him tense. A shadow darted between the trees, swift and almost impossible to catch. Patrick reached for his rifle instinctively but hesitated, lowering it again. The forest returned to silence, only the faint creak of swaying branches breaking it. Yet a tingling sensation climbed his spine. Something unseen was watching. He glanced briefly at Elena, who was rubbing her temples with a look of exhaustion and weariness. "We must move soon," he said quietly with steady but urgent tone. His eyes revealed his alertness, every detail woven into an intricate web he couldn't unravel yet. She looked up, her eyes glassy yet focused. "Did you notice the footprints, the markings?" Her voice was hoarse and strained. "It's like someone was trying to send a message." Patrick nodded, carefully examining the symbols again. "It could be anything natural or something else. We've seen enough strange signs already." He paused, then said, "But this feels different, deliberate." A gust of wind-scattered snow around their boots, the metallic smell intensified, sharpening Patrick's focus. The footprints pointed toward a denser forest area with closely packed trees and twisting shadows. He noticed more tracks, smaller and irregular, crossing the area recently. Elena pulled her battered flashlight from her coat pocket, turned it on, and its beam cut through the gloom, revealing markings on the snow that seemed freshly carved with sharp claws or tools. Suddenly, a faint cracking sound stopped them. It came from deeper in the woods, a quick rustling unlike the wind's noise. Patrick gripped his rifle tighter, speaking softly. "Stay close. Whatever's happening isn't normal." Elena nervously nodded, glancing at the trees. She pointed to smaller footprints veering off the trail and disappearing into bushes. "Someone was here last night or something." Patrick examined the symbols, tracks, and the metallic smell that hung in the air. His mind struggled to find a logical reason, but everything refused to connect. He remembered Yuki's tales of strange shadows and eerie sounds the woods, whispering with a life of their own. A faint hum drifted through the air. He listened, but it vanished suddenly. He looked around with narrowed eyes as the forest stayed silent, hiding its secrets tightly. Turning to Elena, who now clutching her side with white eyes full of fear and determination, he said softly, "We're not alone. And I believe this isn't just an animal or natural event." She nodded with trembling lips, asking, "What's next?" Patrick paused, then indicated the bushes. "We must follow these tracks carefully to discover who or what made them and why. We can't wait for it. We must find out now." Suddenly, a distant growl echoed through the trees, deep and resonant, vibrating in the ground beneath them. Elena's breath caught as her eyes widened in fear. Patrick's grip on his rifle grew firmer, his mind filled with doubts and suspicions. They moved silently into the shadows, only guided by strange symbols and footprints. Whatever lay ahead was no ordinary danger. The forest had changed into something strange, challenging their perception of nature and maybe reality itself. At that moment, they both sensed unseen eyes watching and waiting. The woods kept its secrets closely, but had now begun to reveal some of them. The answers or the deeper secrets lay just beyond the next bend, waiting to be uncovered. The pale afternoon light seeped through frost-covered windows of the ranger station, casting a bluish hue over the cluttered room. Maps, photographs, and scattered notes covered the weathered wooden table, remnants of a night filled with suspicion. Patrick studied a thick folder intently, focusing on images, fresh paw prints, torn fabric caught on a broken branch, strange symbols etched into the snow. His fingers traced a large paw print and one photo edges blurred, but clearly recent. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by distant cracking ice and the faint hum of an old heater. Sitting across from him, Ahmed leaned forward with elbows on his knees and a skeptical expression. His eyes shifted between the evidence and Patrick, then to a map marked with pins and connecting strings near the forest's edge. His voice broke the quiet calmly but skeptically. Patrick, these footprints might belong to a big predator, wolf, bear, or maybe a cougar. The snow isn't deep enough to hide their tracks, and torn fabric nearby suggests something strong but not supernatural. Nature can explain all this. Patrick rubbed his temples with frustration flickering in his eyes. I've seen tracks like these before. They're too precise and calculated. It's more than just an animal passing by. Someone was here. The torn fabric isn't merely claw marks, it's too precise, too deliberate. And those symbols, you saw the photos. Ahmed leaned in closer, studying the images. They could be symbols, yes, but they might also be human marks, hunting signs, ritual carvings, or vandalism. Out here, people often do strange things when they're lost, desperate. Patrick's expression hardened. I've spent over 50 years walking these woods. I recognize predator signs, and these aren't normal. Something's wrong, something irregular in the natural order. I've sensed it, smelled it even at night. Shadows move faster than any animal should, and I've witnessed inexplicable flashes of motion. Ahmed nodded, massaging his jaw. I value your experience, Patrick, but we need concrete evidence, not just instinct. The environment's unpredictable animals act strangely when food is scarce or weather changes suddenly. A recent cold snap might be pushing predators into unusual behaviors. Patrick shook his head slowly, quietly saying, "This isn't typical predator activity. Whatever left those marks and tore the fabric, it's intelligent. It's purposeful. I've seen enough to know that natural creatures don't leave such calculated signs. We're confronting something science can't easily explain." A tense pause lingered between them. Ahmed glanced at the photographs and then at the map where a string linked 2 points near the forest edge. If we're dealing with something beyond the usual, then what? Do you think it's supernatural, a creature or entity? Patrick hesitated, narrowing his eyes. I stay cautious but avoid jumping to conclusions. I want a logical explanation. Still, signs grow. Last night, I saw quick movement like a shadow passing the moonlight, not an animal or person. Something else entirely. Ahmed leaned back with crossed arms. So, what's your plan? Keep watching or wait for more signs? We've been doing that. Maybe it's time to bring in reinforcements or set up a camera trap to catch whatever's out there. Patrick nodded slowly. That's a start, but I also plan to review old reports from nearby stations about strange noises, missing livestock, and odd lights all connected. I want to avoid being caught off guard if something out there decides to act. A faint shuffling sound caught their attention. Patrick instinctively straightened, reaching for his coat. Ahmed glanced at the door, then back at the evidence before them. Did you hear that? Patrick asked quietly. Ahmed nodded. Probably just the building settling or a bird despite the cold. A faint, sharper thud suddenly echoed. Both men exchanged cautious glances. Patrick quietly moved toward the door and opened it. Outside, darkness filled the corridor. Shadows lurked at the corners, and the air was thick with snow and faint metallic scent. He looked out, seeing nothing but the silent hallway, heater hum, and ice crackle. Stepping out, he said softly, "Stay here. I'll check." Ahmed hesitated but nodded as Patrick headed upstairs. A gust rattled the windows on the dark, tense woods beyond. Reaching the second floor, he found an empty corridor with only flickering lights. He paused, ears alert, as the building groaned again, slow and deliberate, like footsteps from an unseen presence. Moving cautiously toward the back window overlooking the forest, he narrowed his eyes at the treetops. Shadows flickered beyond his view, shifting subtly. Something was watching him from the darkness. A cold shiver ran down his spine, not from the wind, but from being watched. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the woods, a brief, unnatural shimmer, then disappeared. His heartbeat quickened. Whatever was outside remained nearby, hidden just beyond reach. His mind raced with rational theories and uneasy suspicions that this night's mystery was far from over. He turned around, voice steady but urgent. "Ahmed, I saw movement, not an animal or person, something else. We must prepare for what's ahead." The biologist's face stayed skeptical, but his eyes showed concern. Outside, darkness grew thicker, and the forest seemed alive beyond sight. The line between logic and myth blurred, promising night's secrets, whether frightening or enlightening. The air's tension intensified, hinting the real threat still lurked unseen, waiting for the right time. Wind tore through the trees near the cabin, howling fiercely, rattling shutters and bending branches, while icy droplets hit the weathered planks. Shadows flickered in the lantern's flickering light as it struggled against the storm. Inside, everyone moved anxiously, aware their fragile shelter was only a thin defense against lurking chaos. Patrick stood by the door, eyes fixed on faint shapes at the clearing's edge. Danger felt close despite the storm's roar. His grip on a makeshift spear tightened as he scanned shadows for signs of breach or movement. Yuki and Elena rushed to strengthen the fragile barrier of blankets and scrap metal they had assembled, fear in their eyes. Elena's trembling fingers fumbled with broken planks, her face pale and sweaty despite the cold. She kept glancing outside, as if expecting darkness to suddenly reveal an attacker. Younger and impulsive, Yuki clutched a small stone tightly, eyes wide with fear and determination. Their frantic efforts seemed almost pointless amidst the howling wind and shifting shadows. A faint, irregular tapping cut through the wind's scream. They all froze, listening closely. It was distant but purposeful, perhaps a warning or signal from an intruder. Patrick stepped closer to the doorframe, peering into the darkness. His breath fogged in the chilly air. The storm made it feel like unseen eyes were watching them. Suddenly, a fierce gust tore through the shelter, ripping part of their makeshift wall and revealing a narrow gap. Elena gasped and pulled Yuki back instinctively. Patrick lunged forward, pressing his hand against the opening as icy air seeped inside. His mind raced. Was this damage caused by the storm or something else? Shadows flickered again nearby, elongated and shifting as if alive in the chaos. "Everyone, stay alert," Patrick whispered quietly, barely audible over the storm. His gaze darted to the flickering shadows outside, trying to tell if they were human or something else. The wind's howling masked any footsteps, but the tension grew heavier, pressing down like a weight. A loud thunderclap sounded overhead, briefly overpowering the storm's roar. Amid that silence, a faint rustling came from the trees, slow and deliberate. Elena covered her mouth to height or gasp. Yuki's grip on the stone tightened as his knuckles paled. Patrick's senses heightened. The presence was closing in. Whether human or supernatural didn't matter anymore. A shadow passed quickly along the edge of the clearing. Everyone ducked or crouched instinctively for cover. Patrick lifted his spear, ready for whatever was out there. The flickering lantern illuminated patches of snow showing faint footprints, small and hurried, that led toward their shelter. The tracks vanished past the trees into darkness. Clenching his jaw, Patrick realized danger was no longer far away. The storm was relentless around the cabin, as if nature itself hid the threat's presence. Yuki's trembling voice asked, should we escape or hide deeper? Elena, desperation in her eyes, urged Patrick, we can't stay here forever, do something now. Patrick hesitated, considering their risky options amid the fierce storm. Shadows outside grew bolder as a violent gust caused the lantern to flicker and then go out. For a moment, shadows outside stretched and reached toward the shelter like grasping hands, while the wind's scream nearly subdued the soft footsteps approaching, deliberate and purposeful. Patrick tightened his grip on the spear, feeling instinctively that their true challenge had just begun. The line between the storm and something far darker blurred beneath its relentless force. Whatever was outside human, supernatural had already entered their world. The night was no longer just a storm, it was a battleground, with dawn's uncertain glow their only hope. As the wind peaked, shadows pressed closer, and faint hints of dawn shimmered beyond reach, signaling imminent change. Trust was waning, the threat felt personal. Their fragile refuge was compromised, and confrontation loomed. The storm exhausted itself with a deep rumble that faded into distant, muffled noise. The battered forest settled into uneasy silence, thick snow clinging to branches, some snapping loudly under weight. Fallen limbs scattered across the ground created chaos amid destruction. Rain seeped through clouds overhead, flooding everything with cold mist that blurred earth and sky. Elena lay on muddy ground under a tattered blanket salvaged from rubble. Her shallow breath stabilized, and her pale face showed a fragile calm contrasting with earlier chaos. The fever faded, offering slight relief. She opened her eyelids, hesitant against the gray light through clouds, focusing on Patrick kneeling nearby with a worried expression. He carefully cleared snow from a branch, his hands trembling not from cold, but recent stress, his eyes darting between Elena and the woods for danger. The air smelled of damp earth, broken branches, and storm remnants. Every leaf rustle sounded loud in silence. Patrick took a deep breath of rain and pine scent, then scanned for footprints or signs of movement, nothing apparent, only an apparently peaceful aftermath, yet suspicion lingered. Is it truly over? Was something unseen lurking, waiting in the shadows to strike again? He gently pressed 2 fingers on Elena's wrist, checking her pulse steady and reassuring. Her eyelids fluttered, and she looked up at him with a faint smile. You're stable, he whispered softly, voice roughed from lack of use. The fever's gone. She nodded weakly, voice barely audible. Did the storm pass? Yes, it's gone for now. Patrick glanced cautiously upward at the swirling clouds. The sky was clearing enough to reveal a subdued sun trying to break through the gray. The fragile light was almost mocking, hinting at normalcy, but hiding a lingering suspicion beneath. He looked back at the forest, no recent signs of disturbance, no footprints, torn branches, or movement. The untouched snow was scattered with debris and flattened patches from fallen trees, creating an illusion of calm. though his instincts sensed something was wrong. But I can't shake the feeling. Something's still here, watching, waiting. Her eyes flickered with fear. She asked if it was still out there after everything. Patrick's jaw tightened, unsure if signs indicated it's gone or still nearby, with silence often hiding danger. The wind moved branches, mocking the fragile peace. Elena observed broken twigs and leaves, tense and wary. Maybe the storm was innocent, or everything was natural. Patrick shook his head. Storms are fierce, but they don't leave carved bark or torn fabric. They don't erase footprints or signs of struggle. Someone deliberately hid something here. She hesitated, doubt flickering in her eyes. What do we do now? He exhaled slowly, glancing back into the woods. We keep moving and stay alert. The danger might have gone, but I doubt it's gone completely. Suddenly, a faint crack echoed from deeper in the forest like a snapped twig, but sharp and unnatural. Patrick instinctively reached for his rifle, but hesitated, realizing shooting blindly could make things worse. "Did you hear that?" Elena whispered, trembling, and he nodded, eyes narrowing. Yes, time to shift position just enough for a better view. They moved slowly, limbs stiff from cold and exhaustion. Patrick ready with his rifle, scanning for movement. Elena followed closely, gaze shifting between shadows as they left the clearing, and the forest pressed in again with an oppressive silence. The uneven ground was a mix of melting snow and muddy earth. Branches cracked underfoot amid their breathing. At a small rise, Patrick motioned for Elena to stay back while he advanced to get a higher look at the woods scene, appearing normal but filled with unease. He carefully lowered himself, then turned to Elena, whose face was pale but alert. When he nodded, they continued their cautious approach. At the tree line, Patrick paused to examine the clearing below. No footprints, torn leaves, or disturbed snow. The natural surroundings seemed to erase all traces, leaving only calmness. Still, the feeling of unseen eyes lingered. He exhaled, feeling relief mixed with suspicion. "It's like it was never here," he whispered. Elena looked around quietly. Maybe it was just the storm. He shook his head slowly. Perhaps, but some signs don't vanish for no reason. Symbols and clues hide something deeper. A sudden gust of wind caused branches to sway and whisper, and the woods shuddered faintly, seeming alive. Patrick clenched his jaw. Whatever it was, he said quietly, "It's not done with us yet." Elena looked at him with cautious hope. So what now? He hesitated before turning to the horizon, where dawn's first light broke through clouds. The storm passed, but shadows remained silent and waiting. Inside the cabin, morning light softly filtered through a slightly open window, illuminating worn wooden floorboards. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, a reminder of last night's watch. Outside, the forest whispered softly as leaves trembled in a gentle breeze without threat. The group sat around the small table with tired but resolute faces, each lost in thought. Elena shifted her position, her face pale but eyes clearer than days before. She glanced between the window and her companions, seeking reassurance. Yuki's small hands gripped a hot tea mug tightly, knuckles white with tension. She looked out at the forest beyond, then back at the others, contemplating various options. Patrick leaned against the wall, his rough hands on his knees, his eyes on the sunlight shining through the branches, but deep in thought, assessing their situation and risks. Past experiences with the unpredictable woods haunted him, reminding him patience might be more effective than rushing. We should stay, Yuki finally said softly but firmly. Leaving now might cause us to miss something important. Maybe what's out there isn't just danger, but part of a bigger puzzle we must understand. Elena nodded slowly, lips trembling into a faint smile. Perhaps we've come this far. Fleeing doesn't seem right anymore after everything we've faced. Patrick looked at them both, doubt flickering across his face. His experience warned him caution was essential. Rushing could cause disaster. Yet a quiet voice inside urged patience, as some mysteries need time to resolve, and acting impulsively might worsen matters. He gently tapped his fingers on the rough table, softly saying, "Staying here means accepting that some things in these woods are beyond us," emphasizing the need for alertness, trust, and weighing risks carefully. The others nodded but looked uncertain. Sunlight cast long shadows on the cabin walls, as if the forest observed silently. The sounds of rustling leaves and cracking branches reminded them nature watched. Yuki looked at our hands before meeting Elena's gaze. If we remain, we must have a plan prepare for strange noises, shadows, or unpredictable events, she said. Elena's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of hope and fear in her expression. "What do you think? Will we discover answers here?" Yuki paused, then nodded. "Not all, but enough clues to guide us. We've seen signs this isn't normal, something's watching or guiding us. We must prepare for whatever's coming." Patrick sighed, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Caution is wise, but overthinking could freeze us. We need balance action with caution. Staying here lets us observe, but also makes us vulnerable." A soft breeze entered, stirring the tattered cloth by the window. Outside, the forest was unnervingly silent. Occasionally, a branch snapped or a leaf fluttered as if the woods were holding their breath. The conversation stopped as everyone considered their next move, uncertainty weighing on them. At last, Elena broke the silence again, her voice firmer than before. "I believe we should stay for now, but establish boundaries, signals, or alerts if things change." Yuki eagerly agreed. "Yes, maybe we can try to communicate with whatever is out there and understand it instead of fleeing." Patrick looked at them, his face marked by age and experience, hesitating before slowly nodding. "Fine, we stay alert and cautious, remembering what we saw or heard, but not letting fear control us. We must be ready to act when necessary." A peaceful quiet filled the cabin, interrupted only by the clock's faint ticking and distant leaves rustling. The sunlight increased in brightness, highlighting the dust particles floating gently in the air. Outside, the woods appeared calm, hiding secrets beneath a peaceful facade. As time went on, a small change took place. The feeling of danger persisted but softened into cautious vigilance. The group realized some truths might stay forever out of reach, mysteries woven into the forest's very essence, waiting to be uncovered at their own time. Patrick looked again toward the window, squinting. Somewhere deep within the trees, unseen but tangible, something remained watching, possibly waiting, or perhaps it had already begun to move silently in shadows, gaining strength. They couldn't know for sure. For now, they chose to stay listening, observing, and preparing. The forest outside stayed silent, but its quiet carried countless unspoken questions. In that stillness, they prepared for what might happen next. Understanding that certainty was impossible, only uncertainty remained.